In a time when gods walked among mortals and the air shimmered with unseen forces, there lived a priest of great renown named Keibu. He was no ordinary man. His wisdom was sought by kings, his words carried the weight of prophecy, and his hands knew the secret touch of healing. The villagers revered him, believing he was favored by the divine. Yet in the shadow of his greatness, he harbored a secret that would unravel his fate. Keibu had fallen in love, not with the sacred texts or the rituals that bound his existence, but with a woman of mortal flesh and fragile heart. She was beautiful, with laughter like running water and eyes that held the depth of forgotten stories. Their love was a defiance against the old ways, a silent rebellion against the gods who had claimed Keibu's devotion. He met her in secrecy, under the vast canopy of the ancient forest where only the wind carried whispers of their love. But love, when forbidden, has a way of slipping through the cracks of silence. The village elders, keepers of tradition and unwavering law, caught wind of his transgression. They gathered beneath the great banyan tree, their faces etched with disappointment and fear. To love a mortal, they decreed, was to turn away from the gods. It was a betrayal that could not be ignored, a sin that would demand retribution. They warned Keibu, pleaded with him to abandon his folly before the heavens unleashed their wrath. But love had already woven itself too deeply into his soul, and he refused. It was on the night of the harvest moon that the curse descended. The air grew heavy, the wind stilled, and the earth trembled as if in sorrow. A figure, neither man nor beast, emerged from the darkness. Its voice was the whisper of 1,000 storms. Its eyes burned with the fury of the forsaken gods. "You have turned from us," it declared, "so we shall turn from you." Pain like fire tore through Keibu's body, twisting his bones, reshaping his flesh. His hands became claws, his face lengthened into the savage snout of a beast, his skin rippled with the thick fur of the hunted. A cry tore from his throat, but it was no longer the voice of a man. It was a sound that belonged to the wild, a lament swallowed by the night. When the transformation ceased, he collapsed to the ground, his breath ragged, his body caught between two worlds. By day, he would walk as a man, but when darkness fell, he would become something neither wholly human nor fully beast. Exiled, he fled into the depths of the forest, where the trees whispered of his tragedy and the rivers carried his sorrow to the sea. Seasons passed, and though his mind remained sharp, the hunger of the beast gnawed at him, whispering in a language of blood and instinct. Loneliness became his companion, the silence of the forest his only solace. Yet even in his exile, he could not forget the warmth of her touch, the softness of her voice. He would return, he swore. He would find her again. But the world had changed in his absence. The woman he loved had vanished, swallowed by time, or perhaps by the fear that followed his name. The village had turned his story into a warning, parents whispering his fate to children who dared venture too far into the woods. He was no longer Keibu, the wise priest. He had become Keibu Keioiba, the half-man, half-tiger, feared, cursed, and forgotten. Desperation twisted into something darker. If he could not find his love, he would take another. He watched the village from the shadows, his keen eyes settling on those who reminded him of her, young women with soft voices and kind eyes. He lurked on the edges of firelight, listening to their laughter, memorizing their faces. Then, one night, beneath a sky thick with stars, a girl disappeared. The village awoke to silence, an absence so profound it sent ripples of unease through their bones. The elders gathered, their voices hushed with fear, their thoughts returning to the priest they had once banished. But Keibu did not return to claim forgiveness. He had embraced the hunger, the loneliness, the beast within, and the village knew this was only the beginning. The village had long lived in the shadow of the cursed priest, his presence more myth than man, more legend than truth. But now, with the disappearance of a young girl, fear slithered through their hearts like a tightening noose. The elders gathered once more beneath the great banyan tree, their voices heavy with urgency. The people whispered of claw marks in the earth, of distant howls carried by the wind, of shadows moving just beyond the reach of firelight. It was clear the half-man, half-beast had returned. Among those who listened were 7 brothers, each bound by blood and an unshakable sense of duty. They were known throughout the land for their strength, not only of body but of spirit. The eldest, wise beyond his years, had seen many storms pass through the village and knew that fear alone would not save them. The youngest, still touched by the fire of youth, clenched his fists at the thought of a creature preying upon their people. One by one, they looked to each other and understood without words what needed to be done. They would put an end to Keioiba's reign of terror. That night, they sat by the flickering fire, their faces cast in shifting light and shadow. The eldest spoke first, his voice calm, measured. "We cannot wait for him to take another. If he has embraced the beast within, then we must hunt him as one." The second brother, known for his clever mind, traced a rough map into the dirt. He returns to the village at night, but disappears before dawn. He must have a lair hidden deep in the forest. The third brother, who knew the language of the trees, nodded. "I have heard strange sounds from the eastern hills. The animals fear that place." The fourth and fifth brothers, skilled with weapons, sharpened their blades, their silence a promise. The sixth brother, who spoke little but saw much, finally turned to the youngest. "You are swift, but swiftness alone is not enough. If we do this, we do it together." The youngest brother's eyes burned with resolve. Together, he agreed. Their plan took shape beneath the stars. They would track Keioiba to his den, study his movements, and strike when the moment was right. They had heard of his strength, his cunning, his ability to shift between man and beast. But he was still flesh and blood, and he could be stopped. The next night they set out. The village lay silent behind them, its doors barred, its people holding their breath. The brothers moved like shadows through the dense foliage, their steps light, their senses sharp. The deeper they ventured, the more the forest seemed to close in around them, as though it, too, wished to keep its secrets. Hours passed before the first sign appeared. A broken branch, claw marks on the bark, footprints too large to be human, yet too deliberate to be those of a wild beast. The trail led them deeper, into a place where the moonlight barely touched the ground, where the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic, something like blood. Then they saw it. Nestled between the roots of an ancient tree was the mouth of a cave, dark and yawning like the throat of some slumbering monster. Bones lay scattered at its entrance, some small, some worryingly human. A shiver passed through the youngest brother, but he did not falter. The eldest raised a hand, signaling silence. They listened. A rustling from within, the slow, measured breath of something large. The beast was there, asleep perhaps, or waiting. The second brother gestured toward the trees. "We set the trap here. When he emerges, we drive him toward the clearing. We take him down together." The plan was sound, but fate is rarely kind to those who challenge the darkness. Before they could move into position, a branch snapped beneath the youngest brother's foot. The sound, though small, rang through the stillness like a battle cry. From within the cave, the breathing stopped. A low growl rumbled from the depths, the kind that did not belong to anything human. Then a flash of movement. Keioiba lunged from the darkness, his form caught in the slanting moonlight. Half man, half tiger, his eyes burning with something that was not quite madness but not quite human, either. He moved with terrifying speed, his claws glinting like curved daggers. The youngest brother barely had time to throw himself aside as the beast landed where he had stood, the ground splitting beneath its weight. The brothers sprang into action. The fourth and fifth swung their weapons, but Keioiba twisted away with unnatural grace. The second and third darted to flank him, their movements practiced, precise. The eldest remained still, his eyes tracking every shift, every breath. Keioiba bared his teeth, and for a fleeting moment, the man within him seemed to surface. His voice, rough and edged with something ancient, cut through the chaos. "You think you can end this curse?" The eldest brother met his gaze, unwavering. "We think we must." The beast laughed, a sound that was neither fully human nor fully animal. Then, with a snarl, he leapt. The battle had begun. The night trembled with the echoes of battle. The 7 brothers moved as one, their strikes precise, their steps calculated, yet the beast fought with a fury that defied reason. Keioiba was no ordinary creature of the wild. He had the instincts of a predator, but the mind of a man who knew loss too deeply. His claws tore through the air, striking with the force of a storm. Yet for all his power, he was outnumbered. The eldest brother feinted left while the second brother drove his spear forward, the tip grazing the beast's shoulder. Keioiba roared, a sound that shook the trees and sent shivers down their spines. The youngest brother, heart pounding, darted behind the beast and slashed at his flank. The attack landed, but the creature did not stagger. Instead, he turned, golden eyes locking onto the boy with something eerily close to recognition. "You fight well," Keioiba growled, his voice strained, half human, half something else. "But do you know why you fight?" The brothers did not answer. The eldest merely signaled, and the attack resumed. Swords clashed, claws slashed. The forest bore witness to the struggle of men against a creature who had once been their own. The ground became slick with blood, some his, some theirs. But the brothers had prepared, and Keioiba, for all his power, was weary. Then, from the trees, a voice rose above the chaos. Soft, unafraid, a woman stepped forward, her figure bathed in moonlight. The battle stilled. Keioiba turned sharply, his breath ragged, his chest rising and falling in heavy, uneven beats. The woman did not flinch. She was young, yet her eyes held the weight of something older, wisdom, sorrow, understanding. "Stop this," she said, her voice calm but firm. The youngest brother hesitated, lowering his weapon ever so slightly. The eldest did not move, his gaze locked on the woman. "Who are you?" he asked. She did not answer him. Instead, she stepped closer to the wounded beast. "You are Keibu," she said softly. "Not just the creature they fear. You are still a man." A silence fell over the clearing, thick and pressing. Keioiba's form flickered, as though caught between two selves. His claws trembled, his eyes no longer burning with rage, but with something deeper. Pain, memory, recognition. "You remind me of her," he rasped. The woman did not look away. "I know." The brothers shifted uneasily, their hands still gripping their weapons. The eldest did not take his eyes off the scene before him, watching the way Keioiba's body swayed, how his breathing grew shallow. He was weakening. The woman knelt before him. "There is another way," she said. "You do not have to end like this." Keioiba let out a low, shuddering breath. His gaze softened, as if, for the first time in years, the beast inside him quieted. The burden of his curse, the weight of his longing, the sorrow of a love lost. Perhaps it did not have to be carried alone. For a moment, the brothers believed he might surrender. That redemption was within reach. Then his expression changed. In the span of a heartbeat, the hesitation was gone. The flicker of humanity vanished, swallowed whole by something darker, something primal. With a sudden burst of strength, he lunged, not at the woman, but at the youngest brother. The boy barely had time to react before the beast's claws raked across his arm, sending him sprawling. The woman gasped, stumbling backward as the brothers surged forward. But the moment had been lost. Keioiba fought like an animal cornered, knowing his end was near, yet refusing to fall easily. The battle raged once more, but now the brothers fought not just with skill, but with fury. The betrayal cut deeper than any claw. The eldest brother struck first, his blade finding purchase in the beast's side. The fourth and fifth followed, their weapons sinking deep. Keioiba let out a strangled snarl, staggering. Blood dripped from his wounds, dark and unrelenting. He swayed, but did not fall. His golden eyes found the woman once more, and in them, for the briefest of moments, there was sorrow. Then the final strike came. The youngest brother, injured but not broken, drove his blade through the cursed priest's heart. Keioiba shuddered, his body jerking as though caught between the two halves of himself. His breath came in ragged gasps, his claws curling weakly at his sides. Slowly, painfully, he collapsed to his knees. The brothers stepped back, watching as his form shifted one last time. The fur receded, the claws dulled, the beast's snout faded, and in its place lay a man. No longer a monster, no longer cursed, just a man who had loved too deeply and paid the price. Keibu's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. His gaze lifted to the night sky, as though searching for something long lost. And then, with a final exhale, he was still. The wind whispered through the trees. The forest, as though sensing the end, let out a breath of its own. The woman knelt beside him, pressing a trembling hand to his cooling skin. She did not weep. Instead, she bowed her head, offering a silent farewell. The brothers watched, their weapons lowered, their hearts heavy. It was over. Yet as they turned back toward the village, the eldest brother could not shake the feeling that the story was not truly finished. That the name of Keioiba would live on, not just as a warning, but as a reminder. A tale of love, a tale of betrayal, and a tale of a man who had once fought to hold on to his humanity, only to lose it in the end.